This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Atelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. President Trump rates talks with his Chinese counterpart 12 out of 10, saying they've struck a deal to trim tariffs as China vows to curb fentanyl, buy more U.S. soybeans, and keep rare earth supplies flowing. But just before those talks, Mr. Trump dropped a bombshell, ordering America's first nuclear weapons test in 33 years, saying the U.S. must keep pace with other powers. Another high-stakes face-to-face at the APEC gathering in Gyeongju. Japan's new prime minister meets South Korea's president, seeking future-oriented ties and stronger economic cooperation. And still in South Korea, an almost year-long jolt to the entertainment industry comes to an end. A court ruling in favor of talent agency Hybe in its battle with girl group NewJeans. Ahead on the bulletin, from shiny diplomatic gifts to leveraging its top stars. See what Seoul's been doing, using the APEC summit as a platform to amplify South Korean culture. Presidents of the U.S. and China have agreed to ease trade tensions. They have created months of international turmoil. While the leaders met face-to-face today for the first time in 6 years, Donald Trump called the meeting a roaring success. Xi Jinping offering a more muted response, saying a consensus has been reached on solving an economic dispute. Now, the Chinese leader earlier urged the two countries against falling into a vicious cycle of revenge.
I always believe that China's development goes hand in hand with your vision to make America great again. Our two countries are fully able to help each other succeed and prosper together. Over the years, I have stated in public many times that China and the United States should be partners and friends. This is what history has taught us and what reality demands.
Now, China has agreed to pause its latest round of rare earths export restrictions for a year, a move, Mr. Trump says, removes all roadblocks in the critical sector. Now, he also shared that China will buy what he calls a tremendous amount of American soybeans and farm goods. Beijing confirms it's postponing higher port fees on American vessels, similar to the U.S. on Chinese vessels. Washington is also slashing tariffs on Chinese goods to 47% from 57%, which Mr. Trump says is due to China's promise to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. China will resume its access to U.S.-made chips, including those made by industry leader NVIDIA.
I think pretty soon. We have not too many major stumbling blocks. We have a deal. Now, every year we'll renegotiate the deal, but I think the deal will go on for a long time, long beyond the year. We'll negotiate at the end of a year, but all of the rare earth has been settled, and that's for the world.
CNA's China correspondent Tan Su-hui joins us now from Busan, where the summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping took place. And we also have Nick Harper standing by in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to kick things off with you first, Su-hui. Now, today's meeting was widely seen as a breakthrough in U.S.-China relations, well, on the surface at least. But I'm curious to know, how are the analysts viewing it?
Well, Mr. Trump called this meeting a 12-upon-10 meeting. He said it was an amazing meeting, but observers have anything but glowing words to say anything about this meeting. In fact, they are pretty pessimistic, in fact, very cautious about labeling this meeting a breakthrough. That's because Mr. Trump has had a long track record of going back against his own words and backtracking what he had said before. And so they're afraid that this trade truce will not last. They're afraid that China will back out of this as well. And so they say, you think this trade war is over. No, they say this trade war is still on, and it is a long-term game because of a lot of uncertainty still going on. But at least they are on the same page for some of the outcomes. So China's Commerce Ministry had just announced that fentanyl-related tariff will be down by 10%. The rare earth export rule will be suspended for 1 year. U.S. will suspend a new rule that expands its entity list of export restrictions. China's Commerce Ministry says that the results are not easy to come by, and they're looking forward to implementing and injecting new momentum to ensure that there is stability and certainty in U.S.-China ties.
Okay, so we won't call this deal a breakthrough just yet. But I want to talk about something that was left out, and that's the issue of Taiwan, which was anticipated to be discussed. So since it wasn't brought up, what does this signal about U.S.-Taiwan ties?
Well, it could signal that U.S. is not ready to change its stance on the Taiwan issue. Just days ago, Mr. Trump had said Taiwan is Taiwan, and he didn't seem inclined to talk about the Taiwan issue with Mr. Xi. And so the Taiwan issue seemed to be left off the table this time around. And it seems that more contentious, more sensitive issues were not brought up this time around. Analysts say that's because perhaps they want to keep these sensitive issues away from tariff issues, and they wanted to focus mainly on economic tariff issues this time around. And that's why the meeting had only lasted 1 hour and 14 minutes. And so it was really much shorter than we had all expected. Now, another contentious, sensitive issue that had not been brought up this time around was the TikTok deal. Analysts are saying that this is a national security issue for the U.S., and so it is currently being left off the table. But China did give a reassurance and saying that China will properly resolve the TikTok problems with the U.S. Well, another summit is set to happen next year in April. That's when Mr. Trump said he will be heading to China to meet Mr. Xi again, and perhaps then more fundamental, more sensitive issues will be brought up then. But from now to April is still a long way to go. Anything can happen, unpredictability all around.
Right, it's been a long day for you. I'm going to let you go for now. Thanks very much, CNA's China correspondent Tan Si-Hui. I'm going to bring Nick now into our conversation. Nick, months of trade turmoil between the two economic powerhouses, basically culminating in today's meeting. Is this it for now?
Well, no, I think there's much more to come. As we heard just there were some very deliberate topics left out of today's discussions, and they've already signalled that April will be the next time that they will be meeting face-to-face, Donald Trump heading to Beijing. And I think during that intervening period, the plan is to still work behind the scenes on many of those remaining difficult, thorny issues that quite simply haven't yet been agreed to. President Xi said that they had reached consensus, suggesting that they are really being managed to find some common ground, but neither side has got everything that they wanted. I mean, from the simple perspective of tariffs, those remain. They have been reduced, but for Chinese imports entering the United States, they will still be hit with a 47% tariff rate, and that is still an incredibly elevated rate. Several other discussions during this meeting between the two of them, things that weren't touched upon, also included those super AI high-powered chips. The US has that export curb, in particular on NVIDIA's most powerful chips heading to China. The worry is, from the US perspective, that China will be using them in their military development. Donald Trump said that they did not speak about the so-called Blackwell chip. That still needs to be discussed, as does Taiwan, as we heard just a moment ago. So many things resolved, but still work to be done behind the scenes. Definitely not a significant breakthrough overall.
And another surprise, Nick, was just mere minutes before the meeting. Mr. Trump, he talked about resuming this nuclear testing program that was, paused or halted for more than 30 years. I mean, the timing of this announcement, help us unpack that.
Well, that's right. I think this can only be seen as one thing, a very deliberately timed message there from the US president to the Chinese leader. The US really flexing its muscle going into this meeting, showing that the United States won't be messed with. But from Donald Trump's perspective, he says that the US is simply doing what China and Russia are already doing. He said that he wanted testing to occur on an equal basis. Really, he says this is in response to what other countries are doing. But it does roll back US foreign policy by decades. The last time there was testing here in the US was back in 1992, and it ended because the Cold War ended. So I think the signal and the optic from the US president really is that perhaps that Cold War is rumbling away in the background and that China and Russia need to be countered on the international stage when it comes to nuclear power. The US president wanting to show that the US is standing ready and able with those nuclear capabilities, and it intends to test them in the meantime.
All right, many thanks for that report. Nick Harper reporting for CNA from Washington, D.C., and also thanks to CNA's China correspondent Han Se-hui in Busan. Well, for more insights into the summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, we will be chatting with Wang Huiyao later this hour. He's a founder of the Center for China and Globalization, as well as a former counselor at the China State Council. Now, ahead of the APEC summit, South Korea's Lee Jae-myung met with Japan's new Prime Minister, Lee-Takaichi. Well, the two leaders are seeking to maintain warm ties, even amid traditional sources of friction, such as historical and territorial disputes. While Seoul says the summit offers a chance to build trust between the two countries, there are concerns that Ms. Takaichi, who's known for her hardline stance, such as her previous visits to a shrine, the war dead, could pose a problem to bilateral ties. But the new leader so far has avoided the visit that could anger its neighbors. All right, for more, we are joined by CNA senior correspondent Lim Yun-suk, live from Gyeongju, South Korea. Yun-suk, first up, tell us what the key takeaways of today's meeting between President Lee and Prime Minister Takaichi.
Well, this meeting apparently lasted for about 41 minutes, and we are hearing that it had ended with both leaders saying that they wanted to take relations forward and they wanted to pursue this future-oriented partnership between the two sides. Now, apparently, President Lee Jae-myung welcomed the new prime minister here to South Korea and said that, he hoped that the two countries would be able to work together to tackle not just domestic issues, but also international issues, considering, the changes in this global environment. Now, we should be getting more details as to what came out of that meeting, but so far, that's the details that I'm getting right now here in Gyeongju. But, just before this summit was held between the two leaders, there was a press conference that was given by the South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Hyun, and, he talked about a wide range of issues at that press conference. But there was a question by a reporter about what South Korea expected from that summit meeting between the two countries, and he said, whenever there's a new government, there are always expectations and concerns, and it is the same situation with Japan. But he did say that the significance of this summit is that shuttle diplomacy is being restored, and South Korea is hoping that this shuttle diplomacy between the two sides will be able to continue under the new prime minister in Japan. And he said in the last summit meetings, South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung and the previous Japanese government had discussed a wide range of issues, including low birth rates and democratic issues that are of concern to both countries. And South Korea is hoping that they can keep pushing, discussions on those issues too, adding that, however, there were still hurdles between the two sides.
걸림돌이 되는 것들이 있는 것도 사실입니다. 그래서 한일 양국의 그 당국자들은 다양한 그 경로를 통해서 그 발전에 저해가 되는 요소들을 상대방에게 전하고 그것을 해소시켜 나가는 노력을 계속해 왔습니다. 앞으로도 그런 것을 통해 가지고 장기적으로 더 크게 발전할 수 있기를 바랍니다.
And as you said, territorial issues and historical issues had strained bilateral ties for decades between the two sides. And right now, there are concerns here in South Korea that perhaps relations could strain if the new Prime Minister Takaichi, who has been in the past paid respects to the Yasukuni Shrine, a site that has been a flashpoint in Japan's relations with South Korea and Japan. And so South Koreans here are hoping that, under the new leadership, at least the bilateral ties that we've seen in the last few months will continue and that they will be able to improve bilateral ties.
Well, President Lee, he's also set to meet his Chinese counterpart, Xi. That's happening on Saturday, just as Seoul hosts the APEC summit. So what can we expect from those talks? And how do you think Seoul's meetings with Japan and China could have their influence on the summit itself?
Well, yes, that is going to be another highlight here in Gyeongju. The leaders expected to meet on November 1st, and it will be President Xi's first visit to South Korea in 11 years. Now, President Xi Jinping did arrive here in Gyeongju following his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump in Busan. And, the meeting on Saturday is going to be the first face-to-face meeting between the two leaders. And here it's being seen as an opportunity to, for the two leaders to be able to build mutual trust and allow them to have, this frank discussions, but broad discussions on the overall relationship between the two countries. Now, Foreign Minister Cho Hyung was also asked at that press conference as to what South Korea was expecting from that summit meeting. And let's hear what he had to say.
한중 간에는 여러 가지 민생 분야의 협력, 즉 경제 분야의 협력 사안이 많이 있고 또 이런 협의를 통해서 큰 성과를 거둘 수 있으리라고 믿습니다. 이것은 한중이 중요한 서로 이웃으로서 앞으로 그 관계를 발전적으로 만들어 나가는데 중요한 계기가 되리라고 믿습니다.
Recently, there have been a rise in anti-Chinese protests here in the capital, Seoul, and also we saw it, yesterday here in Gyeongju, and so it's very likely that that is an issue that the Chinese Prime Minister Xi could bring up. Also, many analysts here are saying that it's very likely that President Lee Jae-myung may bring up the issue of North Korea, because especially since in a recent interview with the Chinese media, President Lee Jae-myung did say that he wants China to try and play some kind of a role in denuclearizing North Korea, because he believes that Beijing could do that, and also to help promote peace here on the Korean Peninsula. Now that comes after we saw U.S. President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un not meeting on the sidelines of the APEC as many had expected, and President Lee Jae-myung had hoped that summit meeting, that handshake between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un would go ahead, because he is eager to engage with North Korea to try and get North Korea out of its isolation and for negotiations to begin between South and North Korea. And South Korean President Lee Jae-myung believes that in a way, China being North Korea's biggest economic partner could try and bring Pyongyang to the negotiating table. So I think, there'll be lots of things for the two leaders to discuss when they do meet. But, these bilateral summits are important as they give South Korea a chance to really smooth over the tensions and align their positions ahead of the main summit here in Gyeongju. And it does show that South Korea is trying to somehow, play this balancing role in keeping the channels open with both Tokyo and Beijing, while reinforcing its leadership role as the host of this APEC here in Gyeongju.
Well, thanks for that, CNA senior correspondent live from Gyeongju, South Korea. Well, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, a tale of two stocks. Hyundai slamming on the brakes as U.S. car tariffs impact sales. And Samsung Electronics enjoying the day after chip sales hit a record high in the third quarter.
With the uncertainties of the financial world, where does our economy truly stand? Keep up to date with the latest market trends and get the in-depth analysis that you need to understand the forces driving the global economies. Kickstart your day with an informed view of the business world. Asia Business on Asia First, weekdays on CNA. Brought to you by UOB.
On this episode of Singapore Hour, ever imagined chocolate in a burger? Meet Singapore's very own Willy Wonka.
At Mr. Bucket, we always believe that chocolate should be an experience, not just something you eat.
And 3 ways to take your mud facial to the extreme.
There's something addictive about the chaos and the 5 near-death experiences per kilometre.
Singapore Hour, Friday on CNA.
Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight, and we've got Roland Lim standing by with the very latest from the business world and a Bank of Japan rate decision today. Roland, it had to navigate apparently a tricky path for its economy and currency. What's up with that?
Yes, it did. Fine balancing act. The decision comes amid political and economic uncertainties and mounting pressure for a potential rate hike in December. Japan's central bank has kept its benchmark lending rate steady at 0.5%. Now, it's been at that level since January. The decision was not unanimous, with 2 officials dissenting. The move has been widely expected since it is the first rate-setting meeting since Sanae Takaichi was elected as Prime Minister. Now, Ms. Takaichi is an advocate of easy monetary policy, and Bank of Japan officials are expected to seek more clarity on the new administration's policies before making a move. Apart from a potential stimulus, policymakers also want to assess the impact of U.S. tariffs on wages and the economic outlook, especially soon after U.S. President Trump signed trade deals with Japan. Let's quick check on the Japanese markets. The Japanese yen softened by 0.74% for the day, 158.84 to the dollar. Meantime, the Nikkei 225 ending the day in the green after hitting fresh records on the back of a chip sector rally. Greater China markets, meantime, have had a rough day, even as President Trump announced that he would lower tariffs on China and that Beijing would lift roadblocks to the supply of rare earths. But markets are still awaiting further details from both sides, ending the day in the red. Shanghai Composite down by 0.73%. Second bourse, the Shenzhen component worse off by 1.16%. Hang Seng Index, 0.25% in the red. China lifting roadblocks on its rare earth export controls sent these miners and related shares up. The CSI Rare Earths Index is up 0.86% for the day, and China's biggest rare earths miner, China Northern, is up 2.28 for the day. Meantime, biggest gold and copper miner 13 mining is up 4.6% today, and CATL, which is the biggest battery maker in China, which relies on minerals, is up 2.5%. Now, President Trump discussed NVIDIA chips with President Xi, but not its most advanced Blackwell chips, though it was enough for TSMC, the world's biggest semiconductor manufacturer, to rise more than 1% in intraday trade before ending the day unchanged. And top electronics contract manufacturer Hon Hai Precision, or Foxconn, also ending the day 0.8 in the green. In Seoul, the second biggest semiconductor manufacturer, SK Hynix, ended the day 1.8 in the green. Its rival Samsung Electronics, 3.6 up. Now, turning to earnings, Hyundai Motors' third quarter report card showing U.S. auto tariffs hitting the bottom line, and hard. But Hyundai says that the worst may be over as the U.S. and South Korea struck a deal to lower tariffs to 15%, down from 25%. Revenue for the group's automotive business is up nearly 8% for the June-September quarter at $25.7 billion, but operating profit nearly half the same period last year at just over $800 million. The U.S. is Hyundai's biggest market and accounts for 40% of the company's revenue. Hyundai says that U.S. auto tariffs cost the company more than $1 billion for the third quarter. But the tariff signed yesterday now puts South Korean automakers on par with its Japanese and European rivals. With the reduction of levies, Hyundai says it will maintain its full-year targets. Shares of Hyundai rallied after the news broke, with about the tariff deal, I should say, before pairing off those losses to end the day, well, nearly 3% up. A stellar report card from Samsung Electronics as the AI boom helps drive a recovery at the firm's flagship semiconductor business. Now, operating profit more than doubled from the previous quarter as its chips division bounced back from a brutal slump. Now, after 4 straight quarters of declines, the latest report signals a comeback for the business as the South Korean tech giant looks to catch up with rivals in the advanced AI chip race. Now, it beat on both the top and bottom lines. And while it lags behind its home rival, well, investors are betting of Samsung's chances of using its scale to gain ground in high bandwidth memory chips. It recently secured an order from AMD and is awaiting on final approval from NVIDIA, whose boss is in South Korea this week. Samsung has also inked a deal to supply chips to OpenAI's Stargate project. The results clearly impressing investors. The stock is nearly up 3.6% for the day. A South Korean court has ruled that talent agency Hybe's exclusive contract with girl group NewJeans is valid. The decision is the latest in an almost year-long legal dispute that shook the country's entertainment industry. The 5-member group unilaterally cut its contract with Hybe's label Adore last year over claims of workplace harassment and other issues. But the presiding judge said it is difficult to conclude the contract was violated due to dismissal of its former CEO, Min Hee-jin, and a breakdown in trust. NewJeans' legal team says it will appeal the ruling. Now, should it fail, the girl group would be bound by Hybe's Adore label until 2029. NewJeans members say they respect the court's decision, but noted it may be impossible to resume normal activities due to the lack of trust. The court decision means Hybe would be retaining sole control over one of its most valuable acts. Our share is gaining by as much as 7% immediately following the ruling, ending the day, though, 5% higher. And that is the latest in business. Ochali.
Thanks, Roland. We're going to go for a break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, highly anticipated talks between the U.S. and Chinese leaders appear to ease tensions over tariffs and rare earths. We'll unpack what the Trump-Xi summit means for global trade and more with an expert next.
The CNA documentary, Walk the Line, has been nominated for the 2025 International Emmy Awards.
I don't understand why they come on me.
Watch it on demand at cna.asia.
Ideas, aspirations and attitudes of Singaporeans are changing the nation that raised them.
Passionate Singaporeans living out their very ambitious dreams.
I'm looking to write a story of greatness, of extraordinary people impacting communities.
I guess a part of me wanted to connect even deeper with the people.
There's no point playing it safe. Safe will always be forgotten.
If we as Singaporeans are able to have a satellite that we can truly say was conceived, designed, engineered and built in Singapore, wow, how wonderful would it be?
This is Singapore, we don't give up.
DIY or managed? Which way builds wealth faster? How to get passive income from your household appliances. Plus, giving old medicines new life in a cocktail glass.
Before, no one would ever taste a medicine wine in a bar.
Money Mind, Saturday on CNA.
This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Donald Trump lowers China tariffs and announces an end to Beijing's rare earths roadblock after meeting Xi Jinping in South Korea. The U.S. president hailing talks as a great success. But before those talks even started, Mr. Trump dropped a bombshell, ordering America's first nuclear weapons test in 33 years, saying the U.S. must keep pace with other powers. And Japanese and South Korean leaders hold their first summit to discuss bilateral ties, with both eyeing to pursue what they call a future-oriented cooperation. U.S. President Donald Trump has ordered the U.S. military to immediately resume testing nuclear weapons after a pause of 33 years, a decision made known just moments before his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping this morning.
We have more than anybody, but I see them testing. I say, well, if they're going to test, I guess we have to test. I'd like to see a denuclearization because we have so many, and Russia has some. Russia's second and China's third, and China will catch up within 4 or 5 years. I think de-escalation would be, they would call it denuclearization, would be a tremendous thing. And it's something we are actually talking to Russia about that, and China would be added to that if we do something.
Mr. Trump's decision comes amid a rapid expansion of China's atomic stockpile in recent years. Think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies says the Victory Day parade in Beijing last month revealed 5 nuclear arms capable of reaching the U.S. A Washington-based group estimates that China now has about 600 atomic weapons, more than double from 5 years ago. Now, U.S. military officials predict Beijing will have more than 1,000 nuclear weapons by 2030. According to the Arms Control Association, the U.S. has a stockpile of more than 5,200 nuclear warheads, while Russia has more than 5,500. The U.S. last tested a nuclear weapon back in 1992. Mr. Trump says the test sites in America will be revealed at a later date. China's foreign ministry, meantime, responding to the development, saying it hopes the U.S. will abide by a moratorium on nuclear testing and obligations under a test ban treaty. Its defense ministry separately said Beijing hopes for fair, peaceful and stable ties as it takes an open attitude towards the development of bilateral military relations. CNA earlier spoke with Deborah Elms, the head of trade policy of Einrich Foundation, and she shared her insights on the timing of Mr. Trump's decision to resume his country's nuclear testing.
Well, we all know how fraught this relationship has been and how tense it can get, and also how less tense it can get. And I think we saw all of that swing in attitude from very hawkish to much more dovish in about 5 minutes in the opening communication between the two leaders. You know, Trump, just as he headed into the meeting, as you noted earlier, announced a policy of resuming nuclear testing, which is certainly not on anyone's bingo card that I know of, and yet arrived in Korea apparently prepared to have an excellent meeting and a fantastic outcome. But you can imagine that this, again, the swing from hawkish to not hawkish, literally within a space of minutes, is creating real challenges for everyone who has to meet with Trump. I think it's an attempt to try to show that the United States has more cards to play in this relationship. It's not all about, you know, soybeans and semiconductors and critical technologies. There are other things that are at stake and at risk. But this is a particularly dangerous thing to be waving about, the sort of nuclear weapon card, where all eyes are on Busan, again, both for economic and for political reasons. And I think it's interesting that this is taking place while the APEC summit is also ongoing. That gives an opportunity for the 21 economies in APEC to come together and have a conversation after this to say, wow, what did you think? How are you going to prepare? Is there some way in which we could work together? Can we accelerate progress in this venue, some other venue? And so I think it is quite interesting, the timing at the beginning of this APEC leaders meeting, that you set up the position for conversations at the highest level among some of the most important economies in and around this region.
For further analysis, we are joined now by Wang Huiyao. He is founder of Center for China and Globalization and former counselor at the China State Council. Well, thanks, Dr. Wang, for joining us this evening. First up, let's talk about that pre-summit bombshell. Trump talking about resuming nuclear weapons testing just before the so-called amazing trade talks. So, Dr. Wang, as somebody who has advised the State Council before, what is Beijing thinking or making all of this?
Well, from my personal observation, I think this is shows the typical characteristic of President Trump, because he's getting into the negotiation meeting with the Chinese top leaders, and we have concluded a very big, long list of items of collaboration and all those great achievements. But also, I think Trump has to face hawkish fractions within the United States. And so he probably do some balancing act there to show that he's tough as well. And but also to really get attention. He's always the master of attention there, and I think this is just one of the plan probably he's doing. And but let's not really get away on that. But I think we should really focus on the economic and big achievement of this China-U.S. summit at Busan today.
Okay, so let's talk about that then, this U.S.-China deal overall. The big picture question. What new ground is actually being broken here, or are we just basically back to the, pre-tariff status quo?
No. I think this is very significant. It's really a landmark and shows a new paradigm shift, and a new pattern has been established. We see the second term of President Trump is quite different from his first term, where there's a lot of tariff is escalating and sanctions throughout most of his first term. But the second term, I think we had a month or two of escalation, but quickly calmed down. We had the 5 high-level talks about the special officials and on both sides, and then they have concluded a lot of frameworks and foundation and basis for this summit, which I think is really significant. And so that basically shows that if we pursue dialogue, if we pursue, understanding and mutual, communication, things can be brought under control. And also, U.S. has, for the first time, as just President Xi said, let's get out of this vicious cycle of retaliating to each other. Let's really be pragmatic. And so U.S. realized, you cannot just, as used to, that contain China, sanction China, and restrict China at its own will, but it has to face consequences for that. And really, now both sides realize, the two largest economy, they have to seek strategic stability, as Secretary Rubio said before. So I think this is really a great meeting, establish a new pattern, new dialogue, and we also seen the visit of the state of leaders in the next year. For twice, President Trump visited Beijing in April, President Xi visited the U.S. in the fall. That's marvelous. So I'm sure head of state diplomacy is working, coupled with large scale and those working level officials to really get the deal done. And so that's really, I think, we establish a new style, a new paradigm, a new cooperation. So we cannot really contain each other, and we might as well coexist. Being the two largest economy, and let's seek strategic stability, as Rubio just said.
Yeah, so Dr. Wang, you've mentioned this paradigm shift twice now, and I can hear your optimism there. But the question is, how long will it last, right? There are analysts, they said that Washington's approach is escalating to de-escalate. So you raise the pressure, and then you claim that this relief that we are seeing is some sort of a progress, a pattern that we have seen before, you see. So the question is, how durable is this truce?
No, I think President Trump is really pragmatic. he wants to leave a legacy. He wants to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And he's also need China to do many other things like Ukraine war, Gaza war. And I think there's a bit of mention of quite a bit of discussion of the Ukraine war there with going on. And China can certainly help U.S. Also, we can work out of the UN Security Council resolution and send peacekeeping force. China, India, and BRICS countries can be part of that. So that would be great help for President Trump to get out of this stalemate and bottleneck, and China as being the third party can really make a lot of difference. So more than that, it's also economy. There's a global stability, and also I think there's a coming down on both sides. And really, I'm really glad to see U.S. has lifted this 10% fentanyl taxes, also lifted 24% and put it on hold for another year, and also lifted the 50% of the penetration against Chinese company for another year, and also lifted the port logistic and those other investigation charges for another year. Of course, China also put a pause for a year of the fentanyl, administration control. So I think it's a great achievement on both sides. And of course, on top of that, we still have the TikTok deal is still finalizing. I'm really glad to see that this is really out of expectation on both sides, and this really shows to the world that two largest economies has to work together and to maintain the confidence and trust for the global economy. And also, I think it's going to last because President Trump, this is only first year. He's going to be there for 3 years. As we said, we're going to renew this year by year, and we're going to sign a deal year by year. China start buying soybean now. This is great. So I'm sure, and also China can launch a massive investment into U.S., which is Trump wants as well. So I see a huge potential if we can't get really rivalry. Let's get stability on both sides. Let's be a stabilizer for the world economy.
Right. So besides these two giants, this meeting being held on South Korean soil, both leaders they're also speaking to global audiences, essentially. So how do you think, East Asian capitals, Tokyo, Seoul, the region, how are they reading this moment? And if the trade deal goes as planned, I mean, who's going to be the other big benefiters from this?
Well, I think that, this is great news for all the countries, ASEAN, Japan, South Korea. Nobody wants there is a big fight between China and the U.S. I mean, everybody suffers. So at least we can generate some stability for a year, with upcoming twice presidential visit and meetings. And then next 2 years, I'm sure Trump still has another 2 years mandate, and let's maintain that new outcome. So I think, China is rising, and also more resilient, and also sanctions, trade wars, and, all those tricks that didn't really work on China. And the China import is still rising, and China domestic economy is still growing very well with another new 5 years plan on top of that. So I think, we have to be realistic. As President Xi just said, we don't want to replace U.S. We don't want to aim at the other countries. We just want to peacefully cooperating with everybody. So China always maintains its low profile and willing to work with others. I mean, U.S. has 800,000 military bases everywhere in the world. China doesn't really have much of that. And, nobody wants to replace U.S. So U.S. should really, do whatever is best for the U.S. As President Xi said, the MAGA and rejuvenation of China, it doesn't have to be contradictory to each other. We can all prosper together for both countries and for the world.
All right. Well, many thanks for sharing your insights and optimism with us. Wang Huiyao, founder of Center for China and Globalization, and he's also former counselor at the China State Council. On that note, we're going to go for a break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, South Korean culture gets the chance to shine at this week's APEC summit in Gyeongju. We'll explore how Seoul is leveraging its top stars and more after the break.
Hi, I'm Sylvie. I am a brick artist. One of my most memorable work will be giant carnivorous plants at Gardens by the Bay. It was large enough for me to sit inside and look like I'm being eaten. This is the old Supreme Court for an exhibition. This is called a slot brake, a headlight brake, a grill, jumpers. One of my favorite things to hear is, you mean this is made using bricks, I organized a convention for like-minded souls. This year, we should really strive to go back to a convention. The $1 million question is, where's my phone? Where am I going to find space for another 4 tables? Murphy's Law. Something's going to screw up.
Inside Sylvie's World of Brick Art, premiering 8th November, Saturday on CNA.
right in a chaotic moment.
Midnight later tonight here in Thailand, it's too little too late.
And I asked whether there's a political element to it. Nobody can exactly tell you why.
Look, things are never perfect when you're engaged in politics.
Each one doing what each one wants.
So what's the United Nations doing amidst this world of supreme chaos?
We're pushing for answers every night on Asia Tonight.
Malaysia, flush from the success of securing a peace deal between Cambodia and Thailand, is hosting a regional security meeting in its capital. ASEAN defence ministers and their counterparts from Plus Dialogue nations are in Kuala Lumpur to discuss common strategic and security concerns.
Malaysia, this year, we choose our theme, ASEAN Unity for Security and Prosperity, because these two are very important. So China, prosperity, America, for security and peace. So when they meet and they talk, these two countries, so it is in line with what Malaysia aspire.
CNA senior correspondent Melissa Goh joins us live now from Kuala Lumpur. So, Mel, the Malaysian Defence Minister has met with US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. Basically, what came out of that meeting?
Well, the meeting took slightly longer than scheduled here at the hotel next to the KL Convention Centre. Now, both sides signed and exchanged documents formalising a defence cooperation from equipment to surveillance and enforcement. It's a 5-year arrangement. I was told both sides have conducted joint military exercise before and will continue to do so to enhance maritime security in the South China Sea, one of the most hotly contested waters. Now, Malaysia Defence Minister Muhammad Khalid Nordin said similar military exercises between ASEAN member countries and the ADMM Plus partners such as China, Russia and India will also continue. Now, Secretary Hegseth did not stop to speak to the media after the meeting is over. He brushed off any question relating to US planned restart of the nuclear weapons testing, which President Trump reportedly announced on his way back from South Korea on board Air Force One. Now, he will be here, however, in Kuala Lumpur over the next 2-3 days. So we'll try to get his response for you after the ADMM Plus meeting. Now, this year, the number of observers country has also increased from UK, France and Canada to now include Germany and Turkey. Now, Malaysia Defence Minister said under Malaysia's chairmanship of ASEAN, 20 initiatives were proposed, from strengthening cooperation in defence industries, enhancing capabilities on search and rescue, disaster response, to measures to counter non-traditional threats such as cybersecurity and undersea infrastructure. Now, ASEAN and the defence counterparts, he said, have their work cut out to unite to uphold the grouping centrality and neutrality at all times in this ever complex and evolving world.
Now, Mel, just picking up on what you talked about, Plus Dialogue nations, which include US, China, India and Russia. Basically, how do you think Malaysia is going to manage, because there's ongoing rivalry between all these participants?
You know, Malaysia Defence Minister, he maintains a very calm and a cool stance about it all. ADMM Plus, he said, has been an effective platform for major powers to discuss and iron out their differences. Now, Malaysia has successfully facilitated a ceasefire and a peace deal on Thai-Cambodia borders, just done, and welcome other countries to use the ADMM platform to resolve their conflicts, despite simmering rivalries between the two superpowers. Now, it is what it is. Now, let's have a listen.
We cannot control how any country behave, whether it is our neighbor, whether it is a small country or even a big country. But our approach is we need to engage them. We believe that by having engagement, we can discuss any of our differences, but most importantly, through continuous engagement, we can create trust.
Now, the important thing that he insists that Malaysia must stay neutral, and ASEAN and all the defense counterparts must stay united to uphold ASEAN centrality and neutrality and not get sucked into, having to take sides. And that's why the code of conduct with China is so important in the South China Sea, to avoid any flare-ups. China claimed almost all of South China Sea under the 9 dashed lines, and the responsibility now falls on the shoulders of Philippines, the next chair of ASEAN, to ensure the negotiations can wrap up next year, as well as its effective implementation. Oteli?
Hey, thanks so much for that report. CNA's senior correspondent Melissa Goh in Kuala Lumpur. Now, this year's two-day APEC gathering, even before it officially begins on Friday, has brought together heavyweights, including the first Trump-Xi sit-down in 6 years, and a meeting between South Korean leader Lee Jae-myung and Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. Now, beyond the hard talks, host South Korea used the week to actually flex soft power from K-beauty to K-pop. And for more, we are joined by CNA's Grace Shin to help us unpack this all. So it seems like that's right. South Korea using soft power, to showcase more of their side of your country. There were some elements that stood out, and what actually made you go like, wow.
I think the very first one was the short promo video, 75 seconds, that came out in early October. And it had people, including myself, asking, is this made by AI? And that's because there was just a string of world-class stars, including K-pop star G-Dragon front and center, Cannes winner Park Chan-wook, the director, football icon Park Ji-sung, and even President Lee Jae-myung, who came out just for mere 2 seconds as a runway marshaller. And the setting of this video is a playful K restaurant led by the Michelin-starred chef and also the star chef from the hit Netflix cooking competition called Culinary Class Awards, An Sung-jae. So it's pop, humor, and national branding all wrapped up into this one bite-sized clip. And there was also the live moment of BTS's leader, RM, who took center stage at the APEC CEO Summit, and he became the first K-pop artist ever to present a keynote speech. And he recalled how Hallyu flipped over the years. He remembered his first few years when he went overseas with his group and was asked, are you from North Korea or South Korea? To now everyone recognizing K-pop as a global staple. So let's take a listen to how he felt that K-pop has really evolved over the years.
K-pop success came from respecting diversity and embracing royal cultures, but still holding on to Korea's unique identity. When cultural barriers come down and different voices harmonize together, there's an explosion of creative energy.
It wasn't just BTS's RM. Even the president leaned in. In his CEO Summit opener, Lee Jae-myung framed culture and creativity as part of Korea's growth story while warning against rising protectionism. He even referenced Netflix's most watched series, and that's K-pop Demon Hunters. And he made a metaphor saying that the idols and fans unite to open the Hunmun, which was referenced in the film. And he talked about how this drama series and the Hunmun concept actually is a shorthand for solidarity and cooperation. And also, the host city did half the work when it comes to prowessing South Korea's soft power. Gyeongju, which is the ancient Silla capital, is a museum without walls. Just going outside, you can see tomb mounds, temples, all the way to gold-crowned exhibits. And even the South Korean student often goes there for field trips. So there was also smart stagecraft, too, that added on to Korea's soft power. If you recall, Korea presented U.S. President Donald Trump with the Silla crown replica and the Grand Order of Mugunghwa. Dinner was also tailored to his palate. There was the Thousand Island dressing along with steak, but it also used premium local produce to showcase regional flavor. And near the International Media Center, sponsors pushed comfort Korean food that you could easily see in Korean films and movies, like cup meals, tteokbokki, or fried chicken. And there was even the limited edition with characters from the popular Netflix series K-pop Demon Hunters. So you can see that soft power was scoring this week with star-driven promos, a museum city being center stage, and hospitality that travels as well as the music, allowing APEC 2025 to look, sound, and even taste like pure K culture.
I know, it's very impressive. South Korea's host definitely pulled out all the stops. But beyond that pageantry, do you think this soft power push actually connect to some real-world outcomes, maybe in its policy?
I think it's safe to say so. And we can start with the traveling press pack getting swept in as well, with the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, posting on her social media her lineup of South Korean skincare products. So K-beauty products definitely took center stage. It was baked into the CEO Summit Spouse program, where local brands ran hands-on demo and allowed users there using AI to find out what their personal color is or which K product would suit them the best. So a lot of exposure for Korean labels, which actually showed in major K-beauty chains. The host city actually said one of their major chains saw foreign shoppers account for sales to about 77%, which is up from their usual 20%. So you can see actual sales going up there. On the policy front, APEC also held its first ever high-level dialogue on cultural and creative industries, which moved culture onto the formal agenda. Now, Korea's culture minister actually called the sector a vital engine for jobs and value creation, but it wasn't just him. The APEC Secretariat Executive Director, Eduardo Pedrosa, actually agreed, and he told me before flying out to Gyeongju that South Korea's emphasis on the creative industry, aka its use of soft power, is actually quite notable. So let's take a listen to what he had to say.
One of the things I enjoyed the most in Korea was the focus on the creative industries. No one had thought about that before. So Korea, in a way, is sort of a pathfinder, if you like. Why address the creative industries? Because it's an increasingly important part of our economies. And it's not only an economic issue, but it's a cultural and people issue. It's culture and creative economy through which we can understand that we actually all share the same culture.
And that pretty much wraps up our Thursday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Of course, we have to thank you, Grace, for chiming in and South Korea's soft power. Very impressive. On that note, we wrap up the bulletin this evening. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.